Family Leonardo, me Nasila did on multimedia, the CEO voice of Salon. Today I come for talk to now, my family, make una continue to subscribe to our YouTube channel and share to our friends them. As we always try to bring for the latest news what they happen around Salon, whether it be politics or any other news them, what they happen or gossip, what they bring out to una live and direct. So please, my family, don't forget to subscribe and share to our friends them. You wanna touch the bell icon so that you no miss any video we will try for bring out to una. So that's also we want make una don't forget also for subscribe to we TikTok channel on TikTok and also on Facebook or Facebook page or the Voice of Salon or also the on Instagram Voice of Salon. Please family, and don't forget to share. Okay, thank you now. Tata.
That na for assume say Maada and the opposition politicians across the board we don't decide for constitute an illegitimate regime following the disputed elections of June 2023 go hold or go allow election will happen in 2028 because at the next election cycle that before the 2023 elections, we published articles, several articles. We publish and talk and hold conversation, multiple conversations online, offline, various audios, and the evidence available. So we talk say, no way Maada go win a free and fair election and get a second time on a free and fair election. The only way we could do that is through rigging of the election. And we also point out, say, Maada all by himself, in alone, no go able for rig the election without being assisted by opposition politicians and foreign organizations for rig the June 2023 elections. We've been talking about this 2 years before the elections. We published articles on this leading up to the elections. So the evidence there, both in the podcast and the African Express website, the evidence is there. Documented evidence that nobody has been able to challenge or discredit. So naturally we'll talk about the elections of June 2023 will not come out for be true. So now on that spirit again, we don't launch a new democracy project, what we call the African Express New Democracy Project. We will begin, or we don't already start this September 2025 and it will lead we into December 2028. And that assuming that the elections, the next general elections in Sierra Leone will happen in 2028, whether that election is held in June 2028, July 2028, or September or December, whatever month they decide for do, we they assume, say, the next general election, based on the fact that there were elections in 2023, the next election for happen in 2025. So this is a part of our preparation for all the new political education series. We will lead into the next election and one way for signal to the politicians across the board in Sierra Leone, in the APC, in the SLPP. We're not going to talk about smaller parties now because already part of the Bintumani conference, part of what they call the National Unity Agreement, outside all the smaller parties and the APC and SLPP decide for constitute a government of national unity. That makes it say inside Maada in cabinet, all the appointments we don't make since October 2023 to present. Now people that we don't come off from NGC, C4C, APC, and SLPP, and all the other smaller parties we contest the elections. Everybody get a stake in the current arrangement. So when they talk about power sharing arrangement, there's already a power sharing arrangement. The power sharing arrangement will ensure, say, the politicians of the NGC, led by Kande Keller, those of the C4C, and all the other parties decide for be part of the current arrangement. The other politicians who we already know will not able to be part of that arrangement. We are bribed away. We are paid off to allow Maada to constitute a government without the production of a credible election result. So no matter how much we talk about this, we only talk about it separately. We want to move the discussion forward. And today we want to talk about what we call the 3Ds of the crisis, the legitimacy crisis in Sierra Leone, the 3Ds of the political crisis in Sierra Leone. And what are those 3 Ds? We decided to talk about debts. The Boku debt we Salon don't take, we Maada bill in regime don't take from IMF, from international financial institutions, development agencies, in the name of carrying out social and economic development in Sierra Leone, projects we for not enhance the living standards of people, we still remain unfulfilled or unimplemented, or programs and projects we don't serve as mechanisms for loot development finance in Sierra Leone. That one aspect, that is what we call debts, multilateral debts. We don't need for talk about Sierra Leone being an indebted country. It is a heavily, heavily, heavily indebted country. They don't tell you that how much money Sierra Leone don't take in the name of developing the country, whether those funds are about road construction, about the provision of healthcare, about agriculture, about education, electricity, all social service delivery projects, infrastructure projects, development initiatives are all based on debts whose funds, hundreds of millions of dollars, billions of dollars now, and we not see the development projects launching projects that never get implemented. We end up with ghost projects. This now, the story of Sierra Leone. It was the story under Ernest Bai Koroma. It was the story under Tijan Kaba. It is the story of today, the story of the Maada Bio regime. Accumulating debts in the name of development initiatives, development programs in agriculture, in education, in healthcare, in infrastructure, in telecommunication that never get implemented. Public transportation. All of these full of corruption everywhere. So the evidence is so overwhelming. That's one aspect, then a 1D, what we call the debt. And then they talk about disease. Who say these politicians, they also manufacture the idea of disease. Story about Sierra Leone being disease-prone country. We know they argue, say, people are not sick, malaria, yellow fever, typhoid, because all of this get to do with the failure of the government for provide the infrastructure necessary for take care of the population. We did talk about the situation like the Ebola epidemic, situation like what they call monkeypox. Not too long ago, Sierra Leone saying that they are the leading country where they get the highest number of cases about monkeypox. Because when governments change, everybody tries to develop a crisis narrative. Under Tijan Kaba, the idea was Sierra Leone coming out of war, being the face what they called HIV prevalence, HIV, rising HIV rates. And they use that for get money from Global Fund for HIV and all this money. In fact, professors, anthropologists, academics don't write stories about that, the use of disease in Sierra Leone in the name of development. But the sad thing is, these monies get pumped into Sierra Leone and the health infrastructure remains broken all the time. Under Tijan Kaba, the same thing, how much money went into the so-called HIV program, the global health programs. Then after Tijan Kaba, we come to free healthcare, then the Ebola epidemic, same thing. All the money we then get for say, for build the health infrastructure of Sierra Leone following Ebola, nothing was done. Then we come now when the government changed in America now, you see what in Austin Demby and all the people in Sierra Leone in the health ministry begin to talk about what it say the country are the leading epicenter of monkeypox. I don't even want to go into the details about the number of cases without justification. The same thing, COVID. Use COVID for generate money. Use monkeypox for generate money. Now they talk say and get innovation and they don't even begin to tackle the cases of monkeypox. They don't begin to disappear. These fraudulent ways for developing problems in the country, manufacture problems for generate debt and get what they call foreign direct budgetary support that never get used for even alleviate the social problems. So that what we call disease, the use of disease as a mechanism for generate international finance. But all of these come to the main D of the problem, which is the dilemma of the Maada regime. Since the election of Maada in 2018, the key thing with Maada been talking about is they can fight corruption. They can increase domestic revenue mobilization. They can reduce trillion in debt. You say, in fact, Alex Kuruma and the people that will govern the country before and don't ruin the country, ruin the economy, they don't put the country in a situation of debt that the country they on life support, and they call on the IMF and all these other countries for help and for save trillion from total collapse. He set up commissions of inquiry and everything. The anti-corruption and all that. So what do we do now for examine this facade, this joke about fighting corruption and expose Maada and the politicians across the board say, nah, lie, they like the people of Sierra Leone say they're ready to fight corruption. We don't need to repeat the number of stories we publish. More than 150 articles available on the African Express website. We include documentary evidence, step by step, of the looted finance, the use of money for international travel, for loot, for transfer money. All that here. We don't document that. Now we did not only accuse Maada of being corrupt and the Bio regime of being corrupt. We showed it with papers from the office of the chief minister right across the board. Most of the people who we wrote about had to be kicked out of government. But the corruption that we reported still exists and has grown into monumental proportions before the Bio regime. So in other words, if corruption had been 100% under Ernest Bai Koroma, it has grown to 200 to 300%. That is not to say the Koroma regime was better than the Bio regime, because the APC and the SLPP are implicated in all of these stories of ongoing corruption. The politicians who governed the country yesterday before Maada Bio, they are in the current government. Not too long ago, Alpha Kanu, for example, have been the example for the SLPP. None of them they use for illustrate the evidence of corruption in the Koroma regime. Where is Alpha Kanu today? Where is Victor Fo? Where is where are all these APC politicians? Then they're part of the Maada government. Now they will stay away Maada complete in second term, the rigged second term, then go come when the election happened in 2028 and believes in that then APC now can have power because of the arrangement that we then get. What in APC they fight about now would in the APC go lead the country, Maada go trust, go give them power, go fight them. But the fight is never about the people choosing who they want. The fight is about the elite being comfortable about who will govern the country in the next 10 years and not go truly after the politician that we don't loot the country. So now by turn, APC come, they loot the country for 10 years, take power, transfer them over to SLPP. They say loot the country for 10 years. Now that game then they carry on. This is the national unity, is the unity of the politicians for loot and impoverish the country and then pitch the people against each other. Make una APC supporters, SLPP supporters believe say APC politicians and SLPP politicians they fight. But now the good thing is we don't force these people, don't expose them to the limit that they're not able to pretend anymore that they are not in unity against the national interest. This is why they're all now they sit down together and bargain about what for do, not for do. So we want to talk about deaths, disease, and the dilemma of the Maada regime. As we move into 2026, 2027, and 2028, we would expect saying at the election year, what is the dilemma of the Maada regime? Is Maada going to leave power? And if Maada they left power, because now get choice again for left power based on the constitutional arrangement, what is his plan? What is a headache right now? And when we talk about dilemma of the Bio regime, because we know say Maada in the first place, the APC and even the SLPP politicians never wanted him on the basis that then say, now, under NPRC, he presided over a government that killed people. That was the allegation. They call extrajudicial killer, the Bambe Kamara stories and all of that. Victor Fo, Alpha Kano, all the APC politicians were on radio from monologue Tambayo's show, right across the board. The story was that Maada should not be president because he then would do an inquest on the death of Bambe Kamara and the 29 others, which means as a military officer, he was accused of extrajudicial killings. Why is this conversation important? Not too long ago, a few days ago, one of the NPRC cabinet members was deported from the United States on the basis that he got blood by hand. The no documents in America since 1998 because he was part of a government that is accused of extrajudicial killings, the NPRC. Charlie Bao. The same individual that was part of that government is today the president of Sierra Leone, Julius Maada Bio. So the question is, and before this time, Maada Bio cannot come to the United States. He not been able to come to America. He applied, since he left America, he applied for visa several times. The U.S. Embassy in Sierra Leone rejected him, refused him a visa on the basis that he was part of the NPRC, a military regime that was guilty of extrajudicial killings, killing civilian politicians, political opponents without trial, without due process. That is the allegation against him. And that this makes the United States never allowed him to come back to the United States. So then he became president, and as a result of being president, the part of the courtesy is he was given a visa to be coming to the United States because now he's president. He's carrying the flag of Sierra Leone. He is representing Sierra Leone, United Nations and other places, so there is no way they can say that he cannot come. So now on that basis, they become America. But the message here is that if members of the NPRC, people who participated in the NPRC that are not in government, that are not president, cannot come to the United States, so what is going to happen in Bio after he leaves office in 2028? What thing will happen to Maada Bio when he left power? Will he be able to come to the United States? Will the politicians, the corporations, and the companies that are now US companies, European companies that are working with him and that have also secured these contracts be able to support him the way they are supporting him now? And why is this important? Why the question are relevant? Since 2018 to now, when Maada Bio is in power, we could ask how many people have been killed in cold blood in Sierra Leone from the Pademba Road incident? How many prisoners were killed in Pademba Road by presidential guards? That is the report. How many people died at Tumbo? How many people died at Lunsar? How many people died at Makeni? How many people were killed following the so-called coup of November 2023, the alleged coup? One such person whose death has not been investigated is the Canadian journalist Stephen Douglas. Died or was killed under suspicious circumstances, and nobody has investigated that. That's something will happen under Maada Bio, Canadian citizen, a journalist who has lived in Sierra Leone for so many years. What will happen to the killing of Evangelist Samson and people like that? And which means that Maada Bio, as a civilian president, has presided over a country where innocent citizens, defenseless citizens, people who have no arms, from prisoners to youths who are demonstrating for basic social services, who are protesting against supposed harsh realities that have resulted from corruption and bad policies, were killed by police. No real investigation. Nobody has been held to account in government or outside of government, really. So the families of these people who've been killed deserve some justice. They have to have answers for their loved ones who have been killed. So the same extrajudicial killings will happen when Maada Bio was part of the NPRC as a military officer have also happened when he is president as a civilian president, when he's head of the country as civilian president. So in other words, He was accused of extrajudicial killings as a military officer. Now, as a civilian president, he has also presided over a country where people have been killed without trial. Extrajudicial killings have taken place in Sierra Leone. Post 2028, after 2028, when he leaves office, does he think he's not going to be held accountable? Is he going to get away with these crimes the same way that he was not held accountable for what happened under the NPRC? So these questions are important because they therefore deal with who and how, who comes to power and how the next elections are going to be decided. Because if Maada is going to leave office, he will want to make sure whoever takes power is going to be an individual that will not allow citizens of Sierra Leone, the victims of the extrajudicial killings, families of those people, not for able to hold them accountable or demand justice. We could think about these questions. When we come back, we will talk about this in more detail. We could take a break now. When we come back, we could talk about the dilemma of the BO regime, the deaths, the disease, the use of disease for trying to collect money from countries like the United States, like European countries, using Sierra Leone all the time, from Ebola, from HIV, under the Jacaba to Ebola, to COVID, to now this so-called idea of monkeypox. So after the break, we'll go continue to talk about these 3Ds, the deaths, the disease, and the dilemma of the BO regime. Well, before the break, we mentioned the fact, say, when Maada leaves office in 2028, his greatest dilemma, the thing we could torment him most in headache, now for think about what thing ever happened to him after he leaves office in 2028. Why that question is important? A lot of people have been killed since 2018 to present, beginning with the Pademba Road incident. Armed so-called presidential guards surround Pademba Road and open fire into the prison and killed a number of prisoners. We don't even know the total number of prisoners on the alleged notion that there was about to be a coup or some prison break or something of whatever nature it is. Regardless of the circumstances, there is no justification for armed people for open fire into a prison and kill prisoners who are in custody of the state. Nobody has investigated it. We move from that incident to the Tombo incident, where young people were also killed for demonstrating against government. The same thing in Lunsar, the same thing in Makeni, the same thing in Freetown and other places. We saw young people in Comore in August 2022, demonstrate against the harsh economic policies of the BO regime. They got killed. People got arrested, put in prison. Different stories. Between 2022 to 2023, we collect testimonies of families of people where they talk about how their family members got disappeared, got arrested, they never see them, some in prison, some have died in prison, or some died in different circumstances. Each family member were affected by this situation get a story for tell. And these stories are documented, the evidence is documented and kept. This now wouldn't qualify as the theft of lives. So in addition to the stealing of public wealth, the stealing of the national treasury, the corruption, the loot of public wealth, we get also evidence of the theft of human life in Sierra Leone in the last 7 years that Maada has been in president. And this conversation is relevant because before becoming president in 2018, the APC politicians, including Alpha Kanu, Victor Fo, and all these people, are on record to have gone on radio and television and called Maada an extrajudicial killer, accusing him of the death of Bambi Kamara and 29 others. This was a conversation on radio across the country. Those politicians who said Maada Bio was not supposed to be president or should not be president, now they support and advocate for Bio, they call him the best president Sierra Leone has ever produced. The highest level of hypocrisy. That we talk about. That is the same Maada Bio who has presided over a government, a civilian government, from 2018 to present, and under his leadership, under his watch, under him being president, dozens, some say hundreds of Sierra Leoneans, civilians have been killed by police, by presidential guards, by armed security operatives of the state. They've been murdered, killed without trial, extrajudicial killings. The very APC politicians who be accused of extrajudicial killings are now working with him, and under his leadership, these human rights violations have taken place, in addition to the theft of public wealth, the corruption. So you see the problem? Now, if Bio is going to leave office in 2028, is he going to trust these same politicians who accuse them of extrajudicial killings leading up to 2018 and hand over power to them? Or he's going to find someone in the SLPP or even in the APC where he knows say no go hold them accountable. So when I see the dilemma of the next election, this is where we are heading to a situation, the objective conditions will lead to the real election of 2023 are still prevalent today. And the unfortunate thing is that there is no opposition in Sierra Leone. There is no alternative in Sierra Leone. There is no alternative party. There is no opposition party. There is no independent voice in the country that is speaking truth to power in Sierra Leone. What we have is a bunch of opposition parties that have become part of the state. Politicians in the opposition who surround Maada Bio held him captive and working with him to commit these economic and human atrocities, loot the public wealth, undermine development, divert development funds into their own private uses, and at the same time unleash violence in the country, and then use propaganda for things that they fool the people. You fooling yourselves, deceiving yourselves. So the question, but more not distracted, so more come back to the question. The question is, before Maada Bio became president, the APC politicians, including Victor Fo, including Alpha Kano, including several of the APC politicians now who are working with him, including the SLPP politicians who come we go form NGC and come work with them now, who are now saying Maada Bio is the best president, were the same politicians who were on radio, on record, everywhere saying Maada Bio should not be president because he has blood in his hands. He had a case of extrajudicial killings that he need to clear. And the very politicians now working with him in his cabinet, in his diplomatic service, in his various ministries, departments, and agencies who are now saying he's the best president, but under his reign as a civilian politician and president, prisoners were killed in Padamba Road. Young people were killed in Tombo. They were killed in Lunsar. They were killed in Makeni. They were killed on the streets of Freetown for protesting against government. Those violations have not been investigated. The families of the victims, and these include Evangelist Sampson, include Stephen Douglas, the Canadian journalist who died on the day of the alleged coup of November 2023. All of these cases, multiple dozens and hundreds of cases that have not been investigated. Whoever comes to power in 2028 after Maada Bio is going to be obligated to look into these violations, to look into the corruption, for example, that we have reported. Is going to be forced to look into these human rights cases. Whether the person wants to do that or not, there is going to be public pressure in Sierra Leone. There is going to be international pressure in Sierra Leone and outside of Sierra Leone for make sure, say,
people, the victims of these circumstances, get justice. The perpetrators of these situations are held accountable. Those who undermine the democratization, who violated civil liberties in Sierra Leone, who caused violence leading up to the election of 2023, have to be held accountable. And that includes Maada and all the people. There should be an investigation into the circumstances will lead to the so-called violence in the APC office on the eve of the announcement of election results, where an innocent matron was killed, healthcare worker, killed unnecessarily. And this kind of investigation not just go center around Maada and the UNSL politicians. It has to extend to opposition members, opposition party leaders who worked in collaboration with him to create the condition will lead to this violence. We don't take innocent people their lives. There has to be an end to this kind of impunity. So these issues that they therefore determine how the next elections are going to be conducted, whether they're going to be free and fair. They are part of the issues. And that this therefore also help people know which kind of leader is going to emerge that is going to guarantee accountability, transparency, and an end to political impunity, an end to this economic gangsterism that has been ongoing in Sierra Leone, where a party comes to power, auctions the country's resources to foreign corporations and multinationals, and also take huge debts. You know, a few days ago, I talked about the extended credit facility program. When Maada came to power, he talked, say, Sierra Leone is heavily indebted. And now Maada don't preside over a country that has become more indebted today than it was in 2018. How did that happen? Why? What has happened to the monies, for example, that the IMF has been putting into Sierra Leone in the name of an extended credit facility program? A few days ago, I posted the IMF alone issued 2 extended credit facility programs to the Maada regime. A $172.1 million for support to call a 38-month extended credit facility that they approved in October 2023. And then another $253 million, the same 38-month extended credit facility program in October 2024. The same thing, approving money for the same thing over and over. So when we looked at alone, we're talking about $425 million in debt in just 12 months, according to their own announcements. Now, if you go back to 2018, you look at the progressive disbursement of ECF funds, you begin to wonder, where are these monies? What has happened to the monies? Why the condition of saloon oil still change? Why did they even talk about the inability of the government for pay salaries to workers, whether they are teachers, nurses, healthcare people? Some time ago, I even asked an IMF official who contacted me regarding the situation of Sierra Leone, say they need my opinion about what is the problem in Sierra Leone, how to resolve this. I told them, you cannot be serious. Is it you want information from me, or you want to know how much I know about the crisis in Sierra Leone? But the question was asked, one of the questions was asked this individual, whose name I'm not going to mention now, is that why every time we the IMF want for going to Sierra Leone, send a delegation to Sierra Leone for assess whether the country they meet the conditionalities for the ECF funding, ECF loans, there has to be some kind of a crisis in the country. Now, either you get keke riders and don't protest, or they don't day on strike, or drivers and say in the strike, or you get teachers and say in the strike, or you get doctors and say in the strike. Because the notion is that even if the country corrupt, the country not able to meet or live up to the conditionalities for IMF, the extended credit facility, they have to give money to the country, because in the claim say if you're not doing, there's going to be crisis, there's going to be civil strife in Sierra Leone, and if instability in Sierra Leone, it will affect the entire region. It will affect Guinea, it will affect Liberia, it will affect Ivory Coast, it will affect the entire West African region. So regardless of the evidence of corruption, regardless of the lack of discipline in public finance spending, regardless of the failure of the projected domestic revenue mobilization, the IMF feels obligated in their own argument for continuously disburse extended credit facility, money, loans to the government of Sierra Leone for helping them for take care of the country so that made the country not collapse. So the notion of social instability and crisis is being used as an excuse to put the country, for load more debt on the country. Accumulative debts that never get weighed until later the whole thing. Simple strife don't happen. Disease don't take place. Like in the time of Ebola, where the Ebola crisis happened, one of the arguments is, okay, the country don't suffer, so now more we give them debt relief. And you have this small action aid and Jubilee debt campaigns. They talk, say, when I don't give debt relief. The question, before we talk about debt relief, what has happened to the debts? Where are the monies? And this is not just the IMF, you extend that to African Development Bank, you extend that to World Bank, you extend that to development finance agencies. We talk about the Western Area Power Generation Project for alone, which has accumulated more than $1 billion in there for building one small power plant, not even up to 150 megawatt. They've been talking about this for more than 10 years. And it's Kuruma taking your own debt. Maada can't take their own debt. Up to now, then they are saying they post some like concrete foundation, say they don't start for build the power plant. We will come to that story. That alone, on one side alone, is over $500 million in supposed debts that the Bio regime has accumulated to build a power plant in Sierra Leone that has not been built. And Nkrumah did the same thing. So this is why you find out, say, at this point in the conversation, the APC and the SLPP, they have nothing to say. Their leaders have nothing to say when they come to the African Express, because the evidence implicates almost everyone that has been in leadership in the country since 2002 to present. And we don't even scrape half of that evidence. And it not just implicate the local politicians, it implicate these development, so-called development experts, whether they are in the country, in Sierra Leone, or outside of the country, in Washington, in London, in different places. And we've met many of them. I've gone to meetings in Washington countless times. I just come on to Europe, where I told some of these European officials that when I go for the look at our embassies, you have to be scrutinizing the reports coming from your local foreign missions, the embassies, because sometimes these embassies getting infiltrated by local politicians and also the local corrupt politicians, to the point that they corrupt the embassies. So the embassies begin to misinform their own foreign offices about the situations in Sierra Leone. And this is something I said to the Germans, and I say to other Europeans as well. European citizens have an obligation to make sure that their relations with Sierra Leone, otherwise a bad name that they get for nothing. And this is where the US is now beginning to rethink its own foreign policy. And what Washington is saying, sometimes what the embassy is doing in places like Sierra Leone or Monrovia is different. We know of this. So part of the conversation, part of the effort for rollback corruption in Africa includes impressing upon the foreign offices of these European countries and North American countries the need for scrutinize the reports they are receiving, whether those reports are intelligence reports, economic reports, or the diplomatic cables, because in most cases, many of these embassies have been infiltrated by local officials, political operatives of the ruling of these parties, of the groups that are in power. And these local staffs in these embassies carry out activities that end up smearing the reputation of these foreign diplomats. The same thing, Ghana found out the same thing. The same thing is happening in Sierra Leone and many other places. So these are the reason why we get forward and deepen this conversation on democracy, on debts, on development, and diplomacy itself. But coming back to the actual question, and this is the headache of Maada Bio, now how you go for left office, leave office peacefully, retire, and get the assurance that nobody no go after her. But that is impossible, because you look around Africa now, almost every president that has been in power has been forced out of their countries when they left office. Yahya Jammeh na one, Alpha Condé na another person, and Nkrumah, all of them. Guinea, when the coup happened, Alpha Condé then take an and go out of the country, exile. Yahya Jammeh said the same thing. He's in exile, has to be sent away. But still, even within Equatorial Guinea, there are still demands to bring him to trial. The same thing with Alpha Conde, demands to bring him for trial. Within Ernest Koroma, the same story back. So the thing about, but there are other people, when you look at them all, in the general scheme of things, Alpha Conde and Ernest Koroma, they are far older than Maada Bio. So Maada Bio get more time for leave, more time for the victims of the atrocities in Sierra Leone, whether they are economic atrocities, human atrocities, for hold them accountable, for demand justice, for put pressure on anybody that comes to power. So the question, as we talked about last week, for Maada Bio is, who is the politician in the APC or SLPP that is going to trust enough that he will rig an election for and hand over power to, so he go come out and that person go serve us in your security. And the added question to that, are the people of Sierra Leone going to allow anyone who comes to power for allow